And welcome to this Town Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. Thank you to everybody who came out for Township Day at the Capitol yesterday. A lot of Township content these days, and good luck for folks with their own Township Tuesdays coming up soon. Now, just for folks who weren't there, we had a particularly good Township Day at the Capitol this year, I think. Had a lot of attendance. I think we made some real progress. We got some commitments potentially to help us out with paid leave, some transportation stuff. We got so we got a fair amount of time talking about in issues like protections for township clerks from some of the notary stuff that we've been seeing going on throughout the state, and as well as a lot of our other legislative priorities here. I know it sounds a little hokey here, but I can tell you from my perch here at the association, the conversations that I have with legislators are just absolutely night and day different when there are constituents there in the room. They are so much more helpful. They are so much more willing to talk. It's almost hilarious. So I know for folks, it often doesn't feel like it's difficult to get a sense of how much impact you're having. But the answer is a lot. We wouldn't be. I can talk till I'm blue in the face, and quite frankly, they'll listen. They might listen. They might not. But if you, the constituent, are there in the room with your representative, they look lively. The way that I can describe the difference is, if you remember your first job as a teenager, when the boss walked into the room, the kind of stiffened posture, the sort of pricked up ears, that is a pretty literal description of the difference between talking to a legislator, just myself or just Jeff or maybe Shep, and talking with township officers actually in the room with them. So thank you to folks who came out. Now coming up on the Legislative Center, I'm going to be authoring a couple of letters here that folks can use to support some of the stuff that's getting moving here in the session. Yeah, thank you. So in any event, moving along to the topic of today's presentation, we're going to do a bit of an update to an older topic, one of the first topics that I covered here in my time as an attorney at the Township Association, but we're going to do it with a bit more of a practical eye this time. And so we're talking about conflicts of interest and specifically recognizing them. That's kind of the lens that I decided to take on today's topic because it turns out there's a fair amount of interesting quasi-authority. We'll get into it. All right. In terms of our overall orientation, it's important to remember that when you're talking about conflicts of interest, strictly speaking, there are two. Common law conflicts of interest, which is somebody who has a non-financial, usually, interest in a matter to be acted upon by the board, not strictly speaking a contract, but it could be something like renewing a liquor license, it could be something like zoning decisions, something of that nature. And then statutory conflicts of interest. That is when an officer has a direct or indirect financial interest in a contract with a town. We're voting on a contract being made, we're voting on a payment being made, something of that nature. Now, today we're going to be mostly focusing on statutory, so I'm just sort of raising this to remind you that there is this other thing out there that's worth keeping in mind. And if you've got questions about it, be happy to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk your ear off about it or give me a call. Then, of course, there is this other thing that people often talk about as a conflict of interest, and it comes from a common moral root. That is compatibility of office issues. Can I be the town fire chief and a town supervisor at the same time? Not going to be talking about that one either, just mentioning it to mention that it is also a thing. If you've got questions about it, please do feel free to give me a call. Okay, we're focusing on statutory conflicts of interest this morning. So specifically, this comes from two statutes in our context. Minnesota Statute 365.37, a supervisor or town board must not be party to or directly or indirectly interested in a contract made or a payment voted by the town board. Second one, this one's a little bit broader. Minnesota Statute 471.87. So this one covers not just townships, but also other municipal officials. A public officer who is authorized to take part in any manner in making any sale, lease, or contract in official capacity shall not voluntarily have a personal financial interest in that sale, lease, or contract, or personally benefit financially therefrom. Every public officer who violates this provision is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. Now, for those of you who are following along at home, that means up to 364 days incarceration, $3,000 fine, or both. Now that sounds pretty simple and easy to keep in mind. You can't have your hand in the till. Unfortunately, it is not always easy to spot. Uh, Now, the language that is sort of critical here is that or personally benefit financially therefrom. If you take a step back and you think about how broad that is, it's really quite breathtaking. There's not a dollar amount that this covers. It's as low as 1 cent. There's not like a arm's length level of transactions that can protect you here. Doesn't matter if the benefit is behind two or three different transactions, that still technically is within the ambit. So if you're walking through a couple of examples here, stuff that seems, or at least intuitively seems like it might be fine, hiring a kid to clean a town hall if nobody else wants to do it, or contracting a business business that employs your wife or your husband or your spouse. Or what about something as apparently innocuous as getting a Prime subscription for the township in order to save money on shipping costs for kind of, the sort of everyday essentials that you might occasionally have need of if you want to get a, regular supply of toilet paper without having to go to the store, or anything like that. Can you do that? Um, well, let's walk through it. So what we've got here is a whole lot of authority that is coming from the Minnesota Attorney General's office. And we got to stop and talk a little bit about the nature of that authority because it matters. And part of what's going on here is that the Minnesota Attorney General is not the legislature. Sort of basic constitutional principles, right? The legislature is the one who gets to write the law. The executive executes the law. That is the governor. And the judiciary gets to apply it to particular cases. However, uh, from for a very long time, there has been sort of a consistent problem in specifically municipal law, and that is a lot of these sort of provisions don't really get litigated. Now, in most legal contexts, the way you fill a statute with meaning, so when you face words like personally benefit financially therefrom, what you're really doing is you're looking at a stock of cases, a stock of past precedents where courts are ruling balls and strikes on particular sets of cases, and they eventually sort of create this guidance that you can use to sort of insulate yourself from legal risk. However, because this stuff is so rarely litigated, you often end up with these giant zones of ambiguity in township statutes. And so what's sort of developed over time is this process by which the Attorney General, as a learned interlocutor in the law, somebody who knows the legal system and is reliable, sort of, or at least ideally reliable and not, disinterested, I guess is probably the best way to say it. Uh, Legal authority is operated as a sort of advice system. So it's not law, but it is persuasive authority. That is, courts are aware of this issue and will tend to defer to these interpretations, particularly famous ones, particularly long-standing ones, just because it makes it easier for us to do our jobs, right? We can ask the Attorney General. Attorney General gives an opinion. If we follow that advice, it indicates a certain level of good faith that courts want to reward, right? They want to make it easy for us to plan our business. They want to make it easy for us to act as township officials. So that's kind of when you see these op adi gen citations, that's what we're talking about. Somebody has asked a question of the Attorney General's office and gotten a response in writing back. Okay. What level of familial relationship is needed before you start tripping over this thing? So we've got a couple of opinions from 1958, 1957, respectively. Um, having to do with the employment of a child by a public official. So the public official is employing somebody. It is the public official's own child. And the line that the Attorney General drew was whether or not that child was emancipated. So in theory, there's this status in Minnesota law. You can be emancipated as a minor. That is, you can have the legal rights and responsibilities of an adult for most purposes. So contracting, all that kind of good stuff. The idea here is that your finances are no longer commingled if you are an adult child. So they drew the line at whether or not that child was emancipated. If so, contract's okay. Or a legal adult, presumably. They didn't actually say that. There's no authority to that effect. However, reasonable extension, likely. Okay, in that circumstances, but unemancipated, not. The idea being that, if you're paying your child to clean up the town hall or whatever it happens to be, that's a series of money that is defraying expenses that would otherwise belong to you when the kid's buying stuff for themselves. Otherwise, they'd be coming to you with their hand out asking for financial assistance. So that, in the AG's opinion, apparently counts as, quote, personally financially benefiting, unquote. So that's kind of how far out we're getting in some of these things, which is why spotting these conflicts of interest can be such a trick, right? So moving on to spouses, we've got a couple of pieces of authority here. They've not been super consistent over time, which is one of the reasons that I've got a picture, an AI-generated picture here of the Minnesota legislator shrugging, because who knows, really. But we've got a couple of opinions, one from 38 saying if you're living together, don't do it. Similar rationale. You're defraying expenses that you otherwise would have been liable for. But then we've got a later one, 66, saying whether the interest is disqualifying is a question of fact. That is, a court has to get into the details and find out whether or not that's actually true. You can't say from simply the relationship that that's quote unquote personally financially benefiting. However, we actually have quite a bit more solid authority when it comes to our stock question. And the answer is almost, in most cases, no, don't do it. So we've got here Village of Cortland versus Cortland Electric Company, the 1927 case, but it is a published case from the Minnesota Supreme Court. So it does have, it's got the authority of law here. Contract with an electric corporation whose stockholders were officers of the village was void, and the village was entitled to recover money spent to construct a power distributing plant. That is, they violated a predecessor to this statute because the people who wrote that contract had stock in the company that they were contracting with. Um, we've got some other AG opinions that are a little bit more modern and a little bit more in the line of modern thinking on here. But just to give you a sense of how far out this stuff can get, we've got a case where somebody asked if a member of a hospital board, when the hospital board was controlled, managed, and operated by a city, if our board member is also a stockholder of the bank. So the hospital board is a public corporation for the purposes of Chapter 471. In this particular case, you've got an office holder who owns stock in that bank. That's personal financial benefit when they deposit there. So this stuff gets kind of crazy. Now remember AG opinion. So we're talking about persuasive authority, not binding authority, unlike in the case of the Minnesota Supreme Court. But just be careful, right? So we got another case, Seaway Port Authority of Duluth. It's another bank issue. Apparently, in the early 60s and late 50s, there were a lot of people who owned stock in banks and tried to use that to to direct where public funds went. We got a rash of these cases from the Attorney General's office. Guess it was debatable back then. Anyway, similar fact pattern, similar result. Um, then we've got here another one from the 70s. There is a conflict of interest for a city council member who holds shares in a corporation which would sign lease with the city for consideration exceeding $5,000 when the shareholder council member participates in corporate profits. So what about that other case? It's the township officer is an employee here. Now this is another one that is a little bit vaguer than, quite frankly, I would like. Um, so there's published guidance that goes back a ways. This is from when Rebecca Otto was the state auditor, but published guidance implies that the question turns on whether financial incentives are in the contract with the employee. That's kind of the way they analyze it. I'm bringing this up only to mention it because if you Google it, you'll probably find this document, and I don't trust it. I would not put my faith in it. And the reason that I would not is because there's a statute that sort of implies the other way here. So let me give it to you. It's Minnesota Statute 471.88 subdivision 20. What that is so we've got our 8.7 statute, which forbids it, and then 8.8 is a long list of exceptions to that. For folks who have been to my trainings before, what I tend to call this is hokey pokey drafting. You know, the hokey pokey, put your left hand in, you put your left hand out, put your right hand in, and shake it all about. The idea is that the legislature has created this really broad circle and made it very easy to stick your hand in, and then they've created a series of processes by which you can get your hand out. That's kind of the strategy that they used here. And so one of these exceptions is subdivision 20, which is a contract. Township may enter into a contract even if township supervisor is an employee of the contractor, so long as the supervisor has no role in preparing the contractor's bid or negotiation for the contractor with the township. Well, that prompts a question for me. Why would an exception need to be made if it was already not illegal? Now you'll notice here that I quoted the whole thing, and there's nothing about is there a financial incentive necessary in the first case. So there's nothing about whether there's township supervisors and bonuses have anything to do with this contract, whether or not they get commission, whether or not none of that. Just you can do it under certain circumstances, so long as they have no role in preparing the bid and negotiation for the township. I think the obvious implication of that is the legislature thought it was illegal and wanted to make it legal in this much narrower sense. So I think the state auditor is wrong about that. And like I said, the only reason I even brought up the conflicting advice is because if you Google it, you might get it, and you probably will. So punchline there is I wouldn't trust that one. Now we've got a couple of edge cases that are also in our sort of published literature here. Um, and here I gotta feel sorry for the township supervisors who are involved in this one. But I mean, imagine this. This is a 1952 case from the Attorney General's office, where they brought up this question at the annual meeting. The electors uh, not just approved it, but requested. It was their initiative to do this lease. But the fact that the electors requested the lease, they initiated the thing, was not good enough to save it. Proposed leasing of a building, which was owned by one of the members of the Board of Supervisor, was forbidden. That is, it was a conflict of interest because he's personally benefiting financially therefrom. Even though it wasn't his decision, was the voters' decision, the voters initiated the decision, which is, in terms of the equities, it's kind of bonkers, right? But just to give you a sense of how aggressively that language can be interpreted, any financial benefit, even if it seems like there isn't maybe necessarily a moral problem with this. You gotta be careful. So here's another one that's kind of under the same set of circumstances. We've got an annual meeting that's trying to revive a contract in this case. So contract was originally signed. This one wasn't initiated by the electors, but it's the annual meeting. They want to get gravel. They think they can get a better deal from the town supervisor, which may even have been true, by the way. They don't get into it, but they don't get into it because they don't think that it's an important question in this particular case. Uh, Town meeting, the electors did not have the authority to revive a contract with the gravel pit owned by a town supervisor. Don't matter if it's a good deal, don't matter if it's a bad deal, can't do it. Conflict of interest, personally benefiting financially therefrom. So our bottom line here is there's no dollar amount. Uh, Anybody who is authorized to take part in the making of one of these contracts, that is enough. And can catch almost comically trivial interests, even interests that seem like they should be fine on their face if you've got kind of a practical eye for these things. Okay. So, I mean, that is the bad news, but there is good news. Like I said, this is the hokey pokey. And so once your hand is in the circle, it's also possible to get it out of the circle. So just, we've covered this, but just to remind folks, because it's always good to be aware of these. There are exceptions and townships benefit from a lot of them. 471.88 subdivision 5. Contract for which competitive bidding is not required by law. That is contract for less than $175,000. Now, this one is a trap for the unwary because it's got a whole nother layer of hokey pokey behind it. So it seems fairly simple. It's going to cover the vast majority of township contracts out there in terms of substance. However, there are procedural requirements before you can use it. So it requires a resolution in advance, setting out certain facts. Before you actually get paid, you got to sign an affidavit under penalty of perjury, swearing certain things are true. We got a guide up on this on our website. What you're looking for is in the information library. You're looking for contracting and then conflicts of interest. We've got a sample resolution and sample affidavit for you to fill out. It's not too bad once you get the sample documents. But just be aware, this one on its face looks very easy and very generally applicable, but there's a trap hidden in there. If you just read 471.88 subdivision 5, you'd think, oh, great, this is super easy. You got to page the next couple of statutes before they're like, oh, by the way, here are a bunch of extra requirements that apply to this thing. So I try to always mention that whenever I'm bringing this one up because it's not a thing a reasonable person would necessarily always catch. Here's another big one. Uh, Population of 1,000 or less. Officer of government unit, including townships, may contract to provide with the unit to provide construction materials, services, or both. When the sealed bidding process is used, the unit has a population of 1,000 or less, according to the last federal census. The officer may not vote on the question of the contract when it comes before the governing body for consideration. So this one's kind of handy if you've got somebody who is, you know, the best contractor in a wide range and you're potentially looking at a bigger contract. Now you don't really want to go through the sealed bidding process if you can avoid it because it's quite a pain and it's easy to screw up. And when you screw up, there are definitely some potential consequences to that. However, if you find yourself in a situation where, oh boy, uh, our chairman happens to be the best contractor in 3 counties, you haven't accidentally shot yourselves in the foot. It's still possible to do this. You just got to be careful that you're the right kind of contract. That is construction materials or services. You got to be careful that you're a qualifying township that is 1,000 or less. Vast majority of our members. Nevertheless, you do have to. It's a bright line test, right? Um, so if you qualify, it's potentially useful, and it's potentially useful above that $175,000 line. There's another one, and this one comes up all the time because, township supervisors are public spirited folks, and disproportionately we tend to volunteer for volunteer fire departments. So folks who kind of have their antenna up might be thinking, oh, wait a minute, they contribute to my pension. They contribute some, compensation for services. Maybe they pay for gas. Maybe they give a little bit in terms of wages or something like that. Is that forbidden? Do I have to take a loss on all of this? Well, the answer is no. The Minnesota legislature wants people to volunteer to be volunteer firefighters for obvious reasons, and one of the ways that they have incentivized this is this. 471.88 subdivision 6, which says contract with the volunteer fire department for the payment of compensation to members or for the payment of retirement benefits to these members. You're in a weird little world here. Because of course, in the conventional sense, if you're getting paid, you are not a volunteer. Nevertheless, firefighters use that terminology in a little bit of an odd way. If you are a volunteer firefighter and you are getting these retirement benefits or potential little bit of compensation on the side, you've got a nice little exception here that deals with that. Nevertheless, bottom line, particularly with some of these more complicated kind of stock type transactions, if you're getting close to this, it's a good idea to get somebody's opinion on this thing. You don't want to you don't want to screw this one up, because if you do, it is one of those unfortunate crimes that tends to exist entirely on paper. So, there's not like a dragnet out for these things. It's not like folks go looking for them. But I can tell you, as a practical matter, we do see this from time to time at the association. What'll happen is there'll be a dispute about something else, right? There'll be a gravel pit going in, or are we going to let a data center in, or are we going to, there's some hot button political issue that comes up. Folks get mad about it. Somebody thinks that somebody's acting wrong, and they start paging through a statute book, and they start paging through town records and looking for problems in order to get somebody. And why that matters is because these issues are things that occur almost entirely on paper. So you're in a rough place as a potential defendant if you haven't done your paperwork, because of this sort of hokey pokey structure where it's going to be, once you've paid yourself and you haven't gone through the steps, it's you're not in a place where a defense attorney likes to be. I can tell you, speaking as an ex defense attorney myself here. So, all right. Uh, any questions here? Okay. Well, for those who were present at Township Day at the Capitol, thank you. For folks who are willing to potentially reach out to their legislators on our issues, really appreciate it. It makes a big deal, particularly in a closely divided legislature like this one. What gets attention, what gets oxygen, what gets moving is the stuff that people yell at their legislators about. That's it. That's how these things get decided. So give your folks a call. We'll have some sample letters up on the website by the end of the week here. If you want to just copy and paste them and send them in an email, great. If you want to send them physically, great. But we appreciate your support and your help as we try to defend the interests of townships as a whole at the state capitol here. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
You got a minute there for me, Graham, this is Gussie.
Hi, Gussie. How are you?
I've got a couple of things I want to remind folks of here. And one of the things I'm going to throw into chat here is Township Day coming up. It's a week away. So if you got your newsletter through the mail, okay, which is something that we're all I look forward to this. The February newsletter has information about what you need to do, set up for township. There's a page at the website. You need to go there. That link is going to be in chat here for you. Go ahead and use that. Go to that area at the Township Association and find out what you need to do, the progress, the Board of Audit, the annual meeting, Board of Canvas. All of those things are going to be part of next Tuesday. Also, a big question I'm getting right now is where do we send our payments through for paid leave? Okay, so somebody said the other day to me, it goes to PERA. And I said, oops. Oh, okay. So I'm going to give you a phone number. I'm going to put it in chat here also. Paid leave that's coming up. It's going to be 651 296 6164 or 6141, excuse me. It goes to unemployment insurance. They're supposedly the ones, according to paid leave, who are going to be collecting those payments to paid leave. So that's one of the things that you need to know. And I think I had one other note here for you all. Let me check real quickly before I hold poor Graham up here, who spent the whole day at the Capitol yesterday. Our first um, spring short course, spring short course road trip begins in Winona, March 16th at the Riverport Event Center, 900 Brewski Drive, Winona, Minnesota, 55987. So that's all.
Jesse,
Yes.
we just got a thing from the Minnesota paid leave. It's the um schedule. And at the bottom it says deeds is the phone number to contact.
Okay, so the deed number that I called, which is, let me pull that up for you. the 7777 number,
Yeah.
and they said no to contact UI. Okay?
Okay, perfect.
So that's where you're going to go. Then you're going to go to the 651-296-6141 and say, I haven't had a chance yet because I just called them this morning to contact them and say, how are we going to submit this? So you
Thank
give
you.
them, give them that information
And you can
that
really
you've
see
been
it.
told this is where you go. And if it isn't, where does it go? Okay. That's all I have. Thanks for the time, Graham.
Great. Thanks very much, folks. Appreciate your time and attention. Good luck with your Township Tuesday. And for folks who have any other questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call, shoot me an email. But thank you and have a nice afternoon/morning.